I am really loving this new research. Sweeping gene survey reveals new facets of evolution. Not really, because what they found, they basically studied one gene that's found in what's called mitochondrial DNA. So you know about the DNA in the nucleus of your cells, but you also have DNA in the mitochondria of your cell, the powerhouse of your cell that makes energy. So there's a gene that almost all organisms have, whether they're plants or animals or humans, they have this gene. So they compared it across 100,000 different species and determined from that, because there's so few changes in it, that all species of animals and humans all came about in the last 100 to 200,000 years.
Now, you need to understand, from an evolutionary perspective, that's like an eye blink.
That's a problem.
Just very recent.
Because they
even
say,
by their own standards.
They say they evolved at different times over hundreds of millions of years. Now they're saying everything came into being about the same time as humans, 100 to 200,000 years ago.
Yep.
And then it's the question, how does one explain the fact that 90% of animal life, genetically speaking, is roughly the same age? I wonder. And then listen to this. Was there a catastrophic event 200,000 years ago that nearly wiped the slate clean?
No, but there wasn't one about 4,500 years ago that did. So, and
yeah, see, if they had their dates right, they would be nailing this research.
Yeah, and one of the authors of the article said, this conclusion is very surprising, and I fought against it as hard as I could. In other words, the evidence did not line up. They know the evidence does not line up with the evolutionary worldview at all. And I've seen the evolutionists' response to this, and it ain't good. Let's put it that way. They're not responding well to this because it goes against their ideas.
It says here, basically what they found was almost all the animals emerged at about the same time as humans. You know, that's pretty close, because sea creatures were made a day before land creatures.
That's the same with the flying creatures.
And the flying creatures were made a day before the land-dwelling creatures.
Yeah.
And they also said here that one of the things they found is that there are boundaries, genetic boundaries. In other words, there's a boundary which one kind's not going to change into another, right?
I'm shocked.
And you know what? That's exactly what we've been teaching.
Yeah.
You know, there's boundary. You got a horse kind, an elephant kind, a cat kind, a dog kind, and so forth. You know, an easy way to understand what a kind is. Kind and species are different, not necessarily the same things here. But with a kind, if things can interbreed together, they're part of the same kind. That's why dingoes and domestic dogs and coyotes and wolves and all that, they can ultimately interbreed with each other. They're all part of the same kind. But in the secular world, ultimately cats, dogs, and everything go back to some sort of common ancestor. And what they're finding is that's not the case.
And so in this paper, what they said was species have very clear genetic boundaries and there's nothing much in between. That proves evolution.
Yeah.
The fact that there's nothing in between proves evolution, because that's what you'd expect.
Yeah.
But I want you to know.
I'm using evolutionist logic.
They see this evidence, and the researchers didn't just go, oh, well, you know what, the Bible must be true. They didn't do that in light of this evidence. Instead, they're like, oh, well, this must be new facets of evolution.
Yeah.
So what do? They take the evidence, and they still want to try to interpret it in light of an evolutionary
Well, they're going to rescue it, because this is about a worldview. It's not about the evidence, because the evidence is clear. They're going to have to reinterpret. They're going to have to somehow rescue it so that they can still keep their worldview.
Right. Well, you know, when you look out in the universe, you've got galaxies, and within galaxies there's lots of stars, of course. So they said this, if individuals are stars, then species are galaxies. They are compact clusters in the vastness of empty sequence space. So you've got all these separate groups, and they all arose about the same time as humans, and there's boundaries, and they're trying to figure it out.
Well, Dr. Nathaniel Jenison, who is a Harvard-trained geneticist that works here for Answers in Genesis, he said in an article where he was asked about this, said, there's a great danger to the evolutionary model in this study in ways they don't quite realize yet. And so it just shows, again, that's what I love about being a creation scientist, is what we see out there in the world confirms and is consistent with God's Word. So.
Yeah.
And this is interesting. You know, think about it. Evolution is taught as fact in the public schools, and kids are indoctrinated in it and so on, and they legislate to protect it. Yet the more and more that we get these papers every week, they're changing their ideas, they're saying it's not like this, we don't know why this happens, and now this is just...
Isn't it nice to have a faith that doesn't change every day?
Yeah.
I love standing on the authority of the Word of God.
Answers in Genesis, we haven't changed what we believe since we started because the Bible doesn't change.
That's right.
Yeah.
Right? But evolutionists change their ideas every day. That's why they teach.